We now have the schedule, and today we are going to go win or loss on every game of the Chargers 2024 slate, including me having them getting off to a 3-0 start.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together for 8 seasons now, but this is our 6th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. And to make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, we are going to get into our way too early predictions for every single game. I can tell you this, we both have the Chargers getting to double-digit wins. How are they going to get there? We're going to tell you that right now.
Yeah, that's the funny thing. We both know what our final win totals are, but neither of us have gone through exactly which games or who we have them beating in each of these games. So we're going to kind of break it down into threes, twos, just a way to kind of pair these things together. But like I said, I have the Chargers getting off to a 3-0 start. A part of the schedule we've talked about before is a pretty soft opening. You get the Raiders, who are super unsure about their quarterback situation. Then you get the Panthers, who were the worst team in the NFL in 2023. And then you get the Steelers, and that was the one I went back and forth with as I was going through this schedule. And we all love going through and just being like, yeah, that's a win, that's a loss. It's obviously hard at this point of the season, and you have to kind of go into this assuming everyone's healthy, right? Because you have no idea who's going to be banged up at the time. But there are certain teams, David, that just look a lot different and have a different quarterback in 2024 than they did in 2023. Maybe have a new coach that are kind of hard to figure out. What is this team going to look like? How much better are they going to be? Could they be much worse? Yeah. So as you were going through the first 3 games of the season, how did it all play out for you?
Yeah, I mean, so starting with the Raiders at home, I have that starting with the win. Revenge game there of rivalry. I think Coach Harbaugh understands rivalries. He's going to make sure the team is up and ready and prepared to go get that win back from last year after that just embarrassment on national television. Going up against an inexperienced head coach, a mid-quarterback, I mean, whoever that's going to be, I think the Chargers handle that one. They get off to a 1-0 start. Then you got the Panthers. A lot of turnover here with the Panthers. A new first-time head coach, young quarterback, a lot of new pieces on offense. I just think that the Chargers are definitely the better team there. They're going to take that win. So starting 2-0 here. And then we get to the Steelers. An away game here. New quarterback. Obviously, that's either Russell Wilson or Justin Fields here. These games are always very physical, and they always come down to the end when it's the Chargers and the Steelers. And I think this one can legitimately go either way, but I have them actually dropping this game. So after the first 3 games, I have the Chargers starting 2-1.
And I think for the Jim Harbaugh era, I think you would absolutely take that in a vacuum, not knowing who the opponents are. And that's one of the things, like I said, about the Steelers, where that's the hardest one for me to pick out of these 3. Like, if you're the Chargers and Jim Harbaugh, right, I think one of the things that you're hoping for is that they take care of business against the worst team. So week 2 at the Panthers, even though it's an Eastern time zone game, always tough to travel that far, still the worst team in the league in 2023. A team that had a ton of cap space but also has a ton of turnover. First-time head coach like you talked about. How much better will they be? How quickly can they get that together? Because you're seeing them in week 2. So all those pieces, have they had time to gel? And a lot of those arguments you can make about the Chargers. A lot of new pieces, a lot of turnover, a ton of free agents brought in, whether they're lower tier or not, just a lot of new faces and new rules for this team. And a lot of the stars of years past that are gone now. So I think week 1 against the Raiders, Harbaugh debut at home. You can't lose to the Raiders. Do the number one thing, your number one job as a Chargers head coach, besides trying to lead them to a Super Bowl, is beat the Las Vegas Raiders. FTR, first time for him to kind of show that. Excited. So W there. W against the Panthers, beating bad teams. Beating teams you're obviously better than, I think, is going to be huge for this team. And also winning the games against the really good teams where no one expects you to win. Something we saw very, very little under Brandon Staley. If they weren't favorites, they usually weren't going to win the game for the most part. But the Steelers game, like, I believe it'll be Russell Wilson. That's what I would have to think right now. Who knows what happens during training camp? I do think it'll be Russell Wilson. How much better does he make them? How much better does he make a team that already had a really good defense? That's not a problem. One of the low-key kind of matchups, though, just looking forward, and obviously very soon to tell, but it could be the first time we see Joe Alt get somebody, I mean, he'll get Max Crosby, obviously, week 1, but I'm very excited for TJ Watt versus Joe Alt in that game. 2 out of the first 3 weeks of the season, Joe Alt's going to have Max Crosby and TJ Watt. So I have a feeling we're going to know what this dude is bringing to the table very, very quickly. And also, it's like, hey, if he gets off to a rough start, let's remember he's going up against 2 of the premier edge rushers in the league in the first 3 weeks. So
yeah, out of the frying pan and into the fire with that one, Daniel. My goodness.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I mean, that's a murderer's row. Both of them line up on the left side of the defense very often. So going up against right tackle. Then we'll get into our second batch. We'll go weeks 4, 5, and 6 here. Week 5, obviously, a bye week. I have them at 3-0. You have them at 2-1. How do you see those next 2 weeks playing out, David? You got week 4 versus the Kansas City Chiefs, first time under the Harbaugh regime, and week 6 at the Broncos in Mile High Stadium.
Yeah, so here at home against the Chiefs, I think at this point, the Chargers are going to have the offense and the defense dialed in. And I think they're going to really get up for this game. They know it's a challenge, but I think they're going to be up for the challenge. And I think they're going to take this win at home against the Chiefs.
Wow.
So that's kind of the big surprise upset I have there. Then you have the bye week, which, again, I hate the fact that the bye week is in week 5. It's way too early. I just wish it was more towards the middle of the season so you can get some time to kind of reset and then go take on the rest of your schedule. But that's just not how the cookie crumbled here. So the Chargers get the early bye. Then they go away against the Broncos. Then they're going up against a rookie quarterback or a journeyman quarterback, one or the other. I think the Chargers pass rush is going to absolutely abuse whoever is playing quarterback in this game. They have not played well enough against the Broncos in the last few years, even though they have been the better team, in my opinion. I think that changes under Jim Harbaugh. I have them taking this win away against the Broncos. So 2-1 or 2-0, I guess, in this last stretch here against the Chiefs and the Broncos. Also starting 3-0 against the AFC West.
That would be huge. Getting to that point, 3-0 against the AFC West would be awesome. I don't have the confidence yet to pick them against the Chiefs. That's one of those things where maybe once we get to the season, maybe after I can see the Chargers prove some things to me. There were so many times, David, where we got the hype in the offseason, and it's different under Jim Harbaugh, admittedly. And we're like, maybe this is the year the Chargers can take out the Chiefs. What happened every single time the Chiefs went on to win the Super Bowl? Pretty much the last couple of years when we thought the Chargers might be getting close, they proved they were as far away as they ever were, right? And they couldn't close the gap. So as much as I love Jim Harbaugh, first matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs, you do get them at home, which is nice. I can't pick it yet. I can't pick the Chargers to win that one yet. So we both have them ending up going 4-1 in their first 5. I also have them beating the Broncos in week 6. I think obviously early on in the season, if it is Bo Nix, not a ton of time for him to have seasoned at that point. Hopefully this is where the Chargers extended conditioning comes into play. I think that is one of the big differences. Chargers in the past struggling at Mile High, struggling at the altitude. It's a hard place to play regardless, and they're used to it and you're not. But that's where I think that extra, hey, we're going a little harder in OTAs. That's where you're hoping it pays off. The little low-key matchup here between these two teams, Ladd McConkey versus Trent McDuffie. That's the hard thing with the Chiefs.
That's a good one.
What did they lose, right? I think that Trent McDuffie's probably a better corner even than L'Jarius Sneed is, and he is easily their biggest loss of the offseason that kept pretty much the rest of the band together and added, the fastest receiver in combine history. So it's going to take a lot for them to really knock them off, especially early in the season when everyone should be at their healthiest. Ladd McConkey versus Trent McDuffie, though, kind of another one of those measuring stick games where let's see him go up against a dude who's, when he's playing in the slot, one of the best slot corners in the league, just one of the best corners in the league in general. And then kind of the underlying story, I think, for the Broncos is the Chargers passed up on Sean Payton and decided to stick with Brandon Staley. He ends up going to the Broncos, and because the Chargers didn't go with Sean Payton, they ended up with Jim Harbaugh. So that'll be interesting. Also, Jim Harbaugh knocked the Saints out of the 2011 playoffs, which was the end of Bountygate. He ended up getting suspended the whole next season in 2012, but it was Jim Harbaugh that knocked him out, and a Saints team that I know had Super Bowl aspirations. So both of us at this point, 5-1. I think a lot of people would take that. A lot of fans would take that. Could easily be 3-2 in this stretch. A couple of hard games to pick here. But 5-1 out of the gate, you have to love that, and you have to love that as the start of the Jim Harbaugh era. Some tougher games are coming up, and some games that get really, really tough to pick out, David, and they're not going to go, 16-1, I'll say right now. So we have more great conversations about how this Chargers season could play out and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, though, I need to tell you guys about eBay Motors because passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, rough racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for every time. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. And I think that's something we're hoping under Jim Harbaugh. The guarantee, knowing that the same team is going to show up every single week. But that's the great thing about eBay Motors, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash, and it's all guaranteed or your money back with all the parts that you need at the prices you want. It's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, David, well, both of us have the Chargers going 5-1 through their first 6 games, something that we would really like to see, and something that kind of put my mind at ease a little bit as we were going through the first stretch of the season. And I think the last thing you want to see is the Chargers get out to a hole in the beginning of the season, because as we've seen so many times, it's so hard in the NFL
to dig yourself out.
Such a short season that's like, if you go 2-3 at the beginning of the year, you have to have such a ridiculous record through those last 12 games that it's just really, really hard to do. So let's get into this next batch of games here. We'll go week 7, 8, and 9. You have at the Cardinals. You have week 8 versus the Saints at home. And then you get week 9 at the Browns. So, David, we're 5-1 at this point. Week 7 at the Cardinals is where you're starting. How do you see it playing out?
Yep, so away here against the Cardinals, I think you obviously have to worry about Kyler's legs. I mean, this is a guy who is sneaky fast and very, very quick. And, you know, if he senses any danger, he gets out and he extends plays and he frustrates pass rushers. But this is a really young team with a really young offensive line. So I think the Chargers are going to be able to batter them with that pass rush, and I think they're going to assert themselves with the running game. I see them taking that win against the Cardinals there. Then you have the Saints at home, and then you have the good old matchup of Joey Bosa going up against his old friend, Derek Carr. And I think that's going to be a fun one. You know, Joey Bosa always loves to terrorize him. I think that continues against the Saints. That one's going to be a tough game, but I do have them pulling out that victory as well. Then we get to the Browns, and the Browns are a very, very good running football team. Like, they know how to run the ball. They know how to control the clock. The Chargers games with them are always very crazy. I think this is going to be a knockdown, drag-out fight against one of the best rushing attacks in the NFL. But this is where I have the Chargers taking their next loss. I think this is going to be a very tough game away against the Browns. I have them losing this one. So 2-1 through this stretch of games, still looking pretty good for the Chargers.
Yeah, 7-2 overall at that point. Another thing where it's like, I think it's important to stress the fact that the Chargers kind of have to get fat on this part of their schedule. These are teams that could be a little bit better than last year, could be harder games than you think they are right now looking at it. But they're not going to get easier unless some teams that we've seen that are juggernauts in the AFC get a lot worse. These are the games you have to find a way to win. You have to find a way to beat the Cardinals. Battle of back-to-back picks. Marvin Harrison Jr. versus Joe Alt, what could have been kind of thing. Another team that's hard to forecast, though. They were a scrappy team that should have won 5 games and given the Chargers the 4th overall pick had they made a field goal in the last season, and they were a total mess. A team that totally kind of, tore it down to rebuild it under Jonathan Gannon, Brandon Staley's BFF. I think they're going to be feisty. James Conner, they're an underrated running team last year, but they were also the team that gave up the most rushing yards on per game basis last year in the NFL. How much has that improved? Obviously, you don't know, matchup-wise if that's going to be the same, but a Chargers team that's going to be running the football a lot more. I like their chances in Arizona, in a dome, and a team that you don't have to go very far to travel to. So I also think that offense is going to be very reliant with that group of pass catchers, throwing rocks from a glass house. The Chargers obviously have a very uneven set of receivers as well, but it feels like they're going to have to rely on Marvin Harrison Jr. being awesome right away.
Yeah.
And he could be. So
Sure.
We'll see. Week 8 versus the Saints, week 9 at the Browns. I could flip-flop either of these ones. I think this is a 1-1 stretch from the Chargers either way. I have them the same as you, beating the Saints in week 8. It's very hard for me to get scared of Derek Carr because he's as likely to throw a game away as he is to throw you into a game. That's why I have the Chargers winning that one, especially at home. Having to travel to the Superdome, having to travel down to Louisiana, that's a tough place to play. They have a very raucous, very humid, very raucous crowd that gets behind their team. Same with the Browns, right? And you're getting them in the dog pound week 9. I also have that as an L. It's another game that's hard. What is Deshaun Watson going to look like? The thing I do know, a great defense already that has a freak of nature in Myles Garrett, and I just feel like it's a slugfest that could go either way. It's going to be a knockdown, drag-out type of fight. Yeah. You're kind of playing the Browns at their own type of game with what you want Jim Harbaugh's team to be. They've been doing it. It's your first year doing it, so I think that is a game I could see them dropping. Both of us having them at 7-2 through the first 9 games, which I think is awesome. Let's look at this next stretch here, David. You get Week 10 versus the Titans, and then 2 absolute juggernauts. You have Week 11 versus the Bengals at home, and you get Week 12 versus the Ravens at home. How do you see those 3 games playing out?
Yeah, so Titans at home here. Honestly, they had no business losing to the Titans last year with Derrick Henry. Now that he's gone, I'm even less intimidated by the Titans. I think that they'll be able to beat up Will Levis, and they're going to take that win. They're going to kind of get that revenge back from the previous season. They should not have lost that game. And it still frustrates me, honestly, to this day that they lost that football game. And then against the Bengals here at home, for as good as Joe Burrow has been against Patrick Mahomes, he has not been that good against Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert has had his number. I think that continues. It's going to be a tough game, but I do have the Chargers winning that game as well. I just feel like Justin Herbert is the better quarterback in that matchup there, and I think he proves it once again. And then you have the Ravens game, and this one, the Harbaugh, this one is going to be an absolute brawl. I know Jim Harbaugh is going to go up against his brother. Obviously, the last time that those two went up against each other, it did not go work in his favor. And as much as I'd love to see that change in this one, the Ravens are just such a phenomenal football team. I think it's going to be a tough game, but the Ravens are too tough, and I see the Chargers, taking their next loss on their schedule here against the Ravens.
So I think you still have 9-3 at that point, right? So a win versus the Titans, a win versus the Bengals. I have them losing 2 of these 3 games. At that point, obviously, I had them 7-2. Week 10 versus the Titans. I think it's hard because with Mike Vrabel, you always knew what to expect. You always knew exactly what kind of team it was, which was scary because even if they were a worse team, they could drag you down with them, drag you into the mud, and it could just be a game that's a toss-up like it was last year that ends up going the Titans' way. Even the year before that, I think it was 17-14. Mike Williams fade down the sideline, sets him up for a field goal to win that game. They don't have Derrick Henry anymore, which is a reason, to be feel a little bit better. I just also don't know if Will Levis is any good. I mean, he was really good in some games, and he was really bad in some other games.
Yeah.
Week 11 versus the Bengals. I have it as a loss, assuming this is a healthy Joe Burrow, which might be easy to forget how good he was before he was hurt last year. And some say, hey, when he was healthy last year, he wasn't that great. Justin Herbert wasn't that great when he was banged up last year either, right? So it's hard to say there. My thing is, can the corners hang with maybe the best wide receiver duo they're going to go up against all year? Asante Samuel Jr., presumably Christian Fulton on the outside going up against T. Higgins, presumably, and Jamar Chase. I think T. Higgins will probably stay. That's a tough game. And the Bengals were winning games last year just to show you how good of a roster they were without Joe Burrow, with Jake Browning, right? So I think that shows you the team they've been able to put together there. I could see it being a win. If for these purposes, I have it as a loss, not knowing what it's going to look like. Plus, Lou Anarumo, one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL, hands down. How does Steve Spagnuolo and Lou Anarumo just not end up getting jobs? I mean, can somebody please hire these dudes away so they can get away from the Bengals and the Chiefs?
For real.
God. At least it did happen with the Ravens, though. Mike McDonald gone. He's in Seattle now. Week 12 at home. Jim Harbaugh, John Harbaugh. Same kind of thing I feel with the Browns, where it's like, the Chargers are going to go try to beat the Ravens at their own game. The problem is the Ravens have been doing it. The Ravens have been that team. You're trying to become that team. So I think it's going to be when Jim Harbaugh probably coaches his hardest game of the season. I think it's the game he wants more than any other game on the season. My thing is the Ravens defense I know is going to bring it. Does LA have the firepower to be able to do enough offensively to go win that game going up against the 2023 MVP Lamar Jackson? So I think it's a fair question. I think it's going to be a great game, another slobber knocker, but I have them losing 2 out of 3 in that stretch, which, not ideal, but 8-4, I think at this point you would absolutely take as well. Then things get a little interesting because you have them 9-3 going into the final stretch of the season with a chance to give themselves a really, really good playoff berth. I have them right there as well. Both of us have them in double digits. How high will they get? You have another game against the Chiefs coming up again in Arrowhead. Are the Chargers better equipped to play in Arrowhead in that time of the season? We have so many more questions to get into and more coming up right after this. I do need to tell you guys, though, that today's episode is sponsored by Yahoo Finance. Let's get straight to the point. You want to grow your portfolio to deal with the rising cost of inflation, to pay off your debt or your mortgage, pretty much anything standing in the way of you and your financial freedom, right? With Yahoo Finance, you can get access to the news, data, and tools that you need in order to help you reach that financial freedom. Something I think we all work hard to get to, a little bit less stress, finding that financial freedom and flexibility, and you can do it with Yahoo Finance because for more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data that you need in one place. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures that you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. All right, David, well, now we have the most important stretch of the season. How will the Chargers handle things down the stretch? And again, we're going through all 17 games this year. It's hard to know who's going to be healthy and all of those things. It makes me uncomfortable doing these things this time of year. At the same time, you have a picture of the schedule and send us your pictures of you going W or L for each of these games. We'd love to see them. Hit us up at Locked On LAC. Put it in the YouTube comments if you have it, because it's just a fun thing to do. And it was hard for us to go through and, be like, well, with Jim Harbaugh, this game's probably a win. There's a lot of games you feel like now with Jim Harbaugh you can win. At the same time, you're trying to be realistic. So let's get into this final stretch here, starting with at the Atlanta Falcons. But also make sure you guys are checking out the first ever national 24/7 sports streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today, giving you coverage of every sport around the country by local experts that cover their team every single day. So make sure you guys go subscribe to Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national 24/7 sports streaming channel. David, Kirk Cousins now in Atlanta, making this game feel a little bit tougher. I wish it was Desmond Ridder for sure. The Falcons arguably should have beat the Chargers with Desmond Ridder a couple weeks ago if Justin Herbert didn't stare into a man's soul and make him fumble without even touching him. So how do you see this next stretch of games? You have at Atlanta, you have at the Kansas City Chiefs, and you have at home versus the Buccaneers.
So I'm sure the everydayers have been very happy about where I've taken them as far as the Chargers win-loss record at this point in time. They're not going to like this stretch from me, unfortunately. So
it has to balance out somewhere, right? Unless you have them going like 13-4.
This is where it balances out here. So against the Falcons away here, the Falcons will be better with Kirk Cousins. I mean, he is a competent quarterback, and the Falcons have a ton of offensive weapons, a ton of young, very, very exciting skill players. Bijan Robinson there, obviously, those guys are going to be tough. And I mean, they have a pretty sneaky good defense. This is a game here that I think the Chargers should win, but they are going to lose. And I hate to say that, but then, it goes to the Chiefs. Away at Arrowhead, the Chiefs are hard to beat anywhere. They're especially difficult to beat at Arrowhead. And I'd love nothing more. I truly would love nothing more than to see the Chargers sweep the Chiefs. I'm just not ready to do that. So this is where they lose to the Chiefs. So 0-2 here. And then the Bucs at home. This is a game, and there's a game on every single schedule where you feel like they should absolutely win. And almost everyone's probably going to pick them to win. But in every single year, you lose a game that you should win. Going up against a scrappy quarterback in Baker Mayfield, I have them actually losing this football game. So 0-3 in this particular stretch of the Chargers schedule.
2 of these 4 games are games that we picked as part of the 4 hardest games the Chargers will have in 2024. So I'm not surprised at all about the Falcons or the Chiefs. The Buccaneers are a hard team. Another one of these teams that are really, really hard to figure out. I mean, you talked about it with the Falcons. What can a competent quarterback do with a Drake London and a Bijan Robinson and a Kyle Pitts? Can he transform those guys? Will the Falcons regret not taking a quarterback that could, or not taking a player that could help them this year in the first round with the top 10 pick, and instead taking Michael Penix, who could, not start for 4 or 5 seasons potentially.
Crazy.
So I do have the Chargers taking that one. It could go either way. It's a coin flip for me now. We'll see if I have more conviction when they actually head to Atlanta, play on the East Coast again. Then the Chiefs. This one's hard for me because I thought I would pick the Chargers to take one, and I didn't. And to me, it's just on paper. I can't do it on paper. I can't take the Chargers to beat the Chiefs until I see it, right? I'll see it when I believe it. Patrick Mahomes said it best. Just how could I, right? We're talking about back-to-back Super Bowl champs, a team that didn't really lose much, didn't have Travis Kelce retire, Chris Jones, after making a big stink, back with the Chiefs again, same defensive coordinator who doesn't get poached, same quarterback who had less weapons than he's probably going to have this year. Could Travis Kelce take a huge step back? Sure. Could their defense regress? I don't know, but it's a team that has more weapons and lost L'Jarius Sneed, but added Hollywood Brown, added Xavier Worthy. I think the Chiefs, once again, are going to be one of the best teams in the league. And although I think that Jim Harbaugh is going to have something to say about this Chiefs dynasty, it's just hard for me to see it happening on paper before the season starts and I get to actually see them play a game. So an L for me. They go 0-2 against the Chiefs this year. I don't like it, but until I see it, I picked them and been wrong before and thought this is the year I'm going to have to see it first. Week 15 versus the Buccaneers. It's at home, which I think is a huge difference. I would like their chances a lot less if you have to go down to Tampa Bay. Nobody wants to go to Tampa Bay. I have the Chargers at home, though, pulling this one off and getting a W. So, David, at that point, you had the Chargers at 8-3, then dropping 3 straight games to get to 8-6. Headed into the final crucial 3 games of the season in Week 16 versus the Broncos, at the Patriots in Week 17, and at the Raiders in Week 18. How do you see them ending the season?
Yep. So after an unfortunate skid there by the Chargers dropping 3 in a row, I have things picking up in a very positive way, starting with the Broncos at home. I like this game at home for the Chargers. I think, going against the Broncos here, I think that the Chargers are going to beat up on the Broncos here. I think they're going to impose their will. They're going to run the ball down their throats, and they are going to mess with that rookie quarterback, which I think at this point, Bo Nix is going to be starting. I think the Chargers are going to take that victory at home. Then it's the Patriots at away there in Foxborough in the cold weather. This is a rebuild year for the Patriots. So, I think, whether it's Jacoby Brissett or whether it's Drake May there at quarterback, I think, the Chargers are built better to be able to handle this particular situation, like you put it. If they're going to be physical, if they're going to be able to run the football, I think they're going to be able to do so here. That means that they're going to get this win in the cold in Foxborough. And then they finish up against the Raiders, and I have them winning their 3rd straight game in a row to finish the season, sweep the Raiders, which I think we all want to see. I think we all expect to see. I think the Raiders are going to be out of it at this point in time, and I think the Chargers are going to be surging towards a playoff spot, and they are going to finish things on a high note with a record of 11-6.
I love that. I mean, yeah, we both have them getting to 11-6. Spoiler alert, but we have very different paths to get there. So for me, the final 3 games, Week 16 versus the Broncos, I have that one as a loss, and I don't even really know why. It's just one of those games where a couple games this season are going to happen that the Chargers should absolutely win, and we think they're going to win, and they don't. This is the one I have that for. Week 17 at the Patriots. That one's hard too because there's so many demons to exercise in New England, in Foxborough, especially later on in the season. Last year, they were a terrible team. The Chargers squeaked a win out 6-0. Very different teams, obviously, but that was with Justin Herbert, surprisingly enough. I have them taking that one, and I think the biggest thing is you don't have the boogeyman of Bill Belichick there that you just know is going to take something away, that you know is going to have a masterful defensive plan. I think Jerome Mayo should be good. Hard to know what's going to happen with Drake May. I have the Chargers picking up a W there. And then ending the season the way they started the season, beating the Raiders, getting also to 11-6, and I think you'd take that. I would sign up for an 11-6 season from the Chargers right now. Having a game Week 18 to get to 11 wins, I think would be awesome. Having a game that's meaningful for the Chargers in Week 18, they go find a way to sweep the Raiders. And will that game even mean anything for the Raiders? We'll have to see. But both of us getting to 11-6, I think that's very optimistic. Obviously, we're assuming health for a lot of these games, and we just don't know what those matchups are going to look like as they get closer. But always fun to do. If you guys have your schedules and have your wins and losses already marked on there, send it to us. Put it in the YouTube comments. Send it to us at LockedOnLAC. We'd love to see them. But thank you guys for checking out today's show. Make sure you're back here on Monday because it is the only daily Chargers podcast. Your team every day. And to make sure you don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, as well as finding the show every day on our social media. You can find us on Twitter at Locked On LAC, Instagram at Locked On Chargers, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Talk Sports and David Drogmeyer at Dro Talk SD. And make sure you guys are back here with us on Monday as we always are. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.